Australian's political editor Dennis Shanahan joins me now live from Canberra. Dennis, you know, we've got the budget, it's 2 months out, but this is a huge focus now of financial deliberations in Canberra. We know it's hit hard. There's only 11 of the ASX 200 in positive territory after the throes of coronavirus really hit the markets last week. And we have all these global impacts, particularly the supply chain out of China. You wouldn't really want to be Josh Frydenberg at the moment chairing ERC and trying to pull all this together.
No, certainly not, particularly after you've declared that the budget's back in surplus. So I think that the government has a major problem here. The problem with the coronavirus is that it's multifaceted. Primarily, it is a health problem and it is creating huge anxiety in the community. It's obviously spreading. We've now had what appears to be the first 2 human-to-human transmissions in Australia. So there's no longer a question of when will it come to Australia. It is in Australia and has started to transmit. So that issue is finished, it's done, the government now has to deal with it. Economically, it is completely unpredictable. Senior ministers in the government just say to me, this is so serious because we don't know what we don't know. Where it will go, how it will end, nobody does know. Now, yes, it's not as a virulent virus as some of the previous, like SARS and so on, but it is affecting more people and infecting more people, so there's a greater absolute number of cases. This is increasing the anxiety, it's increasing the pressure. Now we've closed the borders with Iran and China are now blocked. There's a lot of talk that, you know, despite the difficulty of trying to block an EU member from people coming from Italy, there's a lot of pressure to do that. As each country closes down, we close our borders to them, it makes our trading that much more difficult. And so it's a global financial and economic problem as well as a global health problem. I think so far the government, on the strength of taking medical advice from competent medical officers who have been prepared to call it, and the government has been prepared to take their advice, calling the pandemic well ahead of who, and who's on first, is the question of, as long as the government sticks to this, it takes all the advice, puts the health of Australians first, it can't go wrong, and there's only one story in Canberra, politically, economically, financially, and as far as health is concerned, and that's coronavirus.
Look, I 100% agree with you. It's a complete domination of all the issues right across the board, from the front of the paper to the back of the paper. It's affecting everything. And of course, I made the point at the start of the show, the government can thank God they've got a competent minister with plenty of years under his belt in Greg Hunt, who's known for being a really excellent, has an excellent capacity to get across a brief and to be certainly pushing the bureaucracy hard to respond. It's one thing for a minister to make a decision, there's another thing for that decisions and other decisions emanating from that to be implemented. So yes, they're lucky it's Greg Hunt. But I mean, we've also got the circumstances, and I watched this closely over the weekend, and I know you've got a lot of contacts yourself in Europe, particularly Italy. At a time when everyone are really concerned about the movement of people globally on the back of coronavirus, we've got this fracas returning down to southern Europe, Turkey's border, particularly with Greece. Turkey was promised money 2015, 2016 to cope with influxes of people from Syria. And of course, not all that money, they say, has been forthcoming. So they're literally opening the borders and, nerve gas, beg your pardon, bullets and other sort of attempts by Greek soldiers to hold back the influx of people at the border. That's really dominated the news overseas. Where is this all headed? Because a lot of these people, as we know, don't meet the technical definition of refugees.
Well, again, we have a part of mass movement of people in the globe as a result of strife and famine. This has been the greatest decade of movement in the world's history and in the history of humanity. and all sorts of people are mixed up in it. Some people are suffering terribly, some of the people in Syria, and that includes some Australians, Australian children, Australian citizens. Australia tried to do what it could in alleviating some of the pressure on Turkey. We took another 10,000, an additional 10,000 people from the area affected by the Syrian war. It hasn't made any difference really to what Turkey has had to deal with. I feel great concern for Turkey. It has been harbouring millions of people of all sorts, and it wants help from around the world. And so in the end it has resorted, after years of promises for support, it has resorted to effectively opening the borders. This is going to put even greater pressure on Europe, the European Union, and of course relations between Syria, Turkey and Russia, having the US pull out. So it is now at the worst possible time as we see a rise in the number of coronavirus cases, particularly in Iran. We have real problems about the movement of people and pressure at a military side just making everything worse. It couldn't come at a worse time, but Turkey, I think, has little choice but to try and deal with it some way.
Yeah, Dennis is right. Nearly 4 million Syrian refugees are already in Turkey, more on the way. And it was tear gas and stun grenades were used by the Greek authorities over the weekend. Dennis Shanahan, as always, thanks very much for your time.